Happy Friday to those who have already joined us. It's about 9 minutes till the hour, so we will start on time. But I just wanted to welcome you and thank you for joining us. Hi, Bob. Welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
I have
Whew,
started the broadcast, so everyone that's on is kind of part of the session right now. But I wanted to let us kind of mic check.
great.
So you're having a good Friday?
Oh, it's been crazy, but good. How about
Good.
you?
Going pretty well so far.
Good.
So just to and I guess this is spoiler alert for those who have already joined us. Just to let you know, so we have a poll up right now. You should see that. Um, at the top of the hour, I will kind of welcome everyone and close the poll. Then I'll do the quick NCFL welcome, and then I'll turn it over to you. And then when you're finished, you'll turn it over to Becky.
Great.
All right.
Sounds good. Very good. You there,
Perfect.
Becky?
Yep, I'm here. I'm here.
Awesome.
We were muted.
Great.
Huh?
Good. Yeah, that's what, as soon as I'm going to mute, and like I said, when it comes to the LFN slide, I just need, 30 seconds, probably, to say something about the LFN, and then I think I'll be done. Becky, if you would, at the end of your session, when you're done, because I was actually going to put maybe a slide at the very end to say if people would be interested in continuing a conversation about this topic, they certainly can contact me or anybody on the LFN team to really look at how we can keep a conversation going about this.
That sounds great.
Okay, good. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and mute then until it's my turn to say something. Thanks.
Sounds good. Thanks. Hello and welcome to those who have already joined us. We've still got about a minute and a half, 2 minutes before we'll get started, but there is a poll on the screen. So if you haven't completed that yet, be sure to go ahead and enter your answer and we'll get started in just a minute. Thank you. Good afternoon or good morning, depending where you're joining us from. Welcome to today's webinar. I will wait just a couple of seconds. I think a couple people have just come in, and I'll leave that poll up just for a moment. That if you're just joining us, if you'll go on and very quickly click in what is your field of work. And if you're adding something that's other social service or other education, you're welcome to type kind of more detail about that in the questions box, and I can share that momentarily. So as I said, welcome. My name is Patricia Lovett. I'm a team leader for family learning at the National Center for Families Learning, and I work across our family learning grant programs as well as some other professional development roles here at NCFL. Part of our professional development goal is really to provide support to the field and to our partners that really helps to support your work with families. And this webinar today is one example of that. I'm going to go in and close the poll. It's telling me everyone has voted, and I can't show you the screen until we close the poll. So we'll revisit that in just a moment. But just as a quick introduction to NCFL, if you're not very familiar to us, maybe you're coming because of Literacy Funders Network, or just saw our great communications team's work on social media promoting this webinar. I'd just like to give everyone a quick intro. NCFL works to eradicate poverty through education solutions for families. That is our work, is really looking at that two-generational opportunity to create change. And a lot of how we do that is through targeted focus on those providing education and support to children, as well as those providing education and support to adults. And then really specifically in that cross section where parents and children come together and we see an opportunity for generational change. So we're very excited to welcome our friends from the Literacy Funders Network to bring this this webinar to you today. I'm going to go on and show the results of the poll real quickly because we do have that slide, and then we'll get into introducing our guests today. That'll give them an opportunity to see who they'll be talking to before they share about themselves. So it looks like we have 57% joining us in adult education, 14% in adult literacy, 14% in workforce development, 10% in other social service, and 5% in other education. And I do have one response in the question box that one of our attendees is working in refugee resettlement. So thank you all so much for sharing that. I'm going to go on and move the poll so that we can move on through the presentation. So today's webinar is WIOA Career Pathways Innovations, Connecting Adult Education to Workforce Development. And you'll see there are presenters' names. We are actually going to have a quick word from Literacy Funders Network, and then we'll move into the presenters. So today we have Robert Papanetti joining us from the Literacy Cooperative and Literacy Funders Network. Bob, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Patricia. Good afternoon. My name again is Bob Papanetti. I'm with the Literacy Cooperative of Greater Cleveland and currently serve as president of the Literacy Funders Network. And I also want to welcome you to today's webinar. We're really excited and happy to partner with the Center for Families Learning. And I want to particularly thank Becky Raymond from the Chicago Citywide Literacy Coalition for leading today's session. You'll see on your screen what the mission is of the Literacy Funders Network, so I won't go ahead and read that. But just to say that the Literacy Funders Network has been around for about 10 years. It started out exclusively as a group of funders coming together to look at really how to better understand literacy and come up with some solutions for it. And over the past couple years, we've opened up enrollment to practitioners and researchers, again, to better inform some of the work that we do. And it really is a lot about what you as funders and practitioners in the field are interested in. I would like to at this time just recognize other members of our executive leadership team of the Literacy Funders Network. Laura Pimentel with Pro Literacy is currently vice president. Joe Welsh with the United Way of Allegheny County is our treasurer. Other members include Jeff Conyers from the Dollywood Foundation, Frank Ritzy with Central New York Community Foundation, Shay Coughlin with the National Center for Families Learning, and David Pescara from the McCormick Foundation. So again, you'll see my email address on there. If you have any recommendations for future webinars, thoughts about this webinar, certainly feel free to email me. And I'm excited to join you and participate in this webinar. So thank you. And Becky, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks for the introduction, Bob, and thank you to the Literacy Funders Network and the National Center for Families Learning for the invitation to talk about our work here in Chicago. The Chicago Citywide Literacy Coalition is a network of more than 40 adult literacy, adult basic education, English as a second language programs here in Chicago. And I am here with two of our local partners who I'm thrilled to have with me. If they'll just take a second to introduce yourselves.
I'm Norman Ruano, and I'm the Vice President for Workforce Development for St. Augustine College, a private four-year institution in Chicago.
And I'm Andy Drillick, the Vice President of Workforce Services with National Able Network.
Thank you, and thanks for agreeing to join me today. So this work really started a few years ago when the coalition joined with the Institute for the Study of Adult Learning at Penn State University. And it was right when WIOA was coming into play, and we started asking the question, how are adult literacy, adult basic education programs going to fare under WIOA? You know, how is it going to all work together? And we started a study, and I'm going to share some of our research findings from that study. From there, we're going to kind of move the focus more to what that research told us here at the coalition about connecting career pathways to adult education. And then in conversation with Norman and Andy, we'll talk about how local providers came together to create a very innovative solution to connecting adult ed and workforce development here in Chicago. Okay. Thanks, Patricia. So the Institute for Education Sciences study, again, it was done at the Institute for Study of Adult Literacy at Penn State, and we were a core partner along with Houston Center for Literacy and Miami-Dade County Schools. It was a 3-year grant, and we just are kind of disseminating findings now and finalizing the full report. If you're interested in more information about that study, there are a couple links, one to our website and one to Penn State's website, where you can find more information. And Patricia, I'm pretty sure these slides are going to be going out to everyone after, or is there a way people can get these slides so they'll have that link going forward?
Becky, everyone who attends today will receive a follow-up email with a recording of the webinar.
Oh, great. So you'll have access to those links if you'd like any follow-up about the research that we've been conducting.
And Becky, and while we're at a point where I've already kind of interrupted you, I just wanted to note for everyone, if you have questions as the presenters are talking, you're welcome to type those in the questions box. Some of them I may throw to them during the presentation, and then some we'll field at the end.
Oh yeah, thanks for that reminder, because we'd love it if people ask questions as we go. We want this to be as interactive as possible, so we're not taking questions at any particular point. So if you have something, please just send it our way. Thank you. Okay. Thanks, Patricia, if you can advance it. So we really wanted to understand how adult basic education providers in high-need cities were integrating career pathways into their services. And we were really curious about immigrants and adults with barriers to employment and education. We wanted to see which student outcome measures were most extensively used, and to understand how successful programs design and implement career pathways. So there were, if you can just move it forward, Patricia. Thank you. So it was a multi-modal approach to the data. We surveyed, as the first round, we surveyed 147 organizations in Chicago and Houston and Miami. We got great data. Anybody who is on the webinar now and filled out the survey knows that it was pretty intensive in terms of the data that we were collecting about programs, about outcomes. From there, we selected 5 to 7 organizations per city to conduct focus groups. And so kind of in the survey, we asked for recommendations for the focus groups, and then the researchers from Penn State also identified kind of high-performing organizations to have come for the focus group. Finally, from the focus group, 2 organizations per city were selected to do case studies. So that's kind of the overall scope. Again, it was a couple years of research. We're still compiling data and writing the report, but that just gives you a sense of the research that's been done. Okay, so at the beginning of the survey, we presented the class definition of career pathways, and we asked respondents to indicate whether or not they were offering career pathway services, and 83% of them said that they were. And then at the same time, as we kind of drilled deeper into which programs were being offered, 36% of agencies said that they offered career pathways but had no students enrolled in the 6 core career pathway classes. So you can see on the slide kind of the transition to post-secondary, obtaining a post-secondary or stackable credential, some of those real like career pathway programs, apprenticeship, internships, were not well represented when we really looked at the data. So even though programs were enthusiastic, they said they had career pathways in their program offerings, when you looked at the data, there really weren't that many students enrolled in those core classes. So this kind of made us wonder about how robust career pathways were in some of the organizations. And so we have a participant poll, again, our goal to make things interactive. Do these findings match with your experience locally? Okay, and I assume people are participating in the poll now.
We have about 78% now that have participated. I'll leave it open just for maybe about 10 more seconds.
Okay, so we're obviously preaching to the choir here, but yeah, so we wanted to dive deeper into this this topic. Okay, and I don't know if anyone's sharing why or why not, but if they are, Patricia, just feel free to chime in.
I don't see any yet. If you'd like, we could pause just for a moment. Sometimes I know it takes a minute for people to get into that question box and then start adding their thoughts. Would you like me to show the poll again?
No, I think that's fine. I just wanted to make sure we weren't going too quickly here. Okay, well, I'll continue and feel free to chime in. Okay. So at the same time that we saw programs not having these core career pathway offerings, we also looked at where the students were in their programs. And we asked organizations to kind of break down, you know, percentage of students at the various NRS levels. And as you can see from this slide, the bulk of the students were, you know, really at the lower levels, and 69% of career pathway students are low intermediate, adult basic ed, or English as a second language. So we saw kind of this gap of organizations saying they had career pathways, but not really having that many students enrolled in those programs. And at the same time, we saw that the students that were in programs were at a lower level than you would think a student would be able to access traditional career pathways programming. Okay.
Becky, we did have a couple of responses come in if you'd like me to share those.
Sure.
Okay, so one response, we have success with the certifications and diploma pathways, but the internships and apprenticeships seem harder to come by.
Oh, that's great feedback. I think that's what we're seeing here too. I don't know if either of you want to chime in about apprenticeships or internships, Norman?
Well, you know, we have been doing pre-apprenticeship programs for a very long time, and even at the pre-apprenticeship level, it's very difficult because individuals have to come in at a very good level of math and English at a minimum a ninth grade level. And for a lot of the programs, they even have to have a high school or a GED diploma. So it's complicated. And what you find with a lot of, particularly the registered apprenticeship programs, is that the majority of them, unless you have, the high school, you have the GED, you have very high levels of math and English, it's going to be very complicated to enter. So we're talking about, those are more the higher level workforce development programming that, with the population that we can see here, is obvious that there's a mismatch there. There's a gap.
Great, thanks. Okay.
I think that really matches what I saw from the other response as well. We do not have those. We only tutor adults that are reading at a reading level of 6th grade or below. The tutors meet independently with learners. We do not have a central place for small groups to meet. This, though, is why I'm on here. We are working toward getting small groups going again, and I'm interested in how to get this incorporated with basic literacy skills.
Great. Okay, thanks for sharing. Okay. So kind of going back to this gap, more than half of each class or service have grade level test score, some kind of entrance requirement that is making it difficult for some learners to enter the program. And we saw from our study that access to wraparound services was extremely important. And if we're especially thinking that learners are starting at a lower level, that they need to have those wraparound services in order to retain in programs and persist. If they're going to make it to the career pathway level, or more formalized career pathway program, those wraparound services were key, is what we saw through the research. And it did seem even that a lack of the wraparound services and skill eligibility were issues for students in accessing many career pathway services. Okay. And I'm kind of curious again to hear if this is something that people see locally as well. And I think, if you have an innovative solution that you'd like to share, we're curious to learn about what people are doing in other locations to bridge the gap. So please feel free to type and share what you're doing locally.
We have a little over half that have voted, so we'll wait just a few seconds again.
Oh, okay. All right, maybe I need to come up with more creative questions because they're kind of softballs here. Again, share any local examples as we kind of get into how we came together and created a local solution here in Chicago. We're just very curious to hear how other people are addressing this gap.
We have just a very short intro to an answer that I think, I assume you will probably want a little bit more information about, but I work on a workplace skills, oh, she's filling it in now. I work on a workplace skills ESOL project funded by the city of Seattle, serving levels 1 through 3 students. But we see a huge gap between those learners and the requirements to enter IBEST programs at the community colleges. I think there may be more coming in.
Okay.
Let's see the next bit. Colleges require at least 220 on CASAS tests, but typically higher and in reading plus math.
Okay. Norman was also going to share what they've been doing at St. Augustine as an example.
I just wanted to talk about a particular program that we're running right now, which is a pre-apprenticeship electrical construction program, is to prepare individuals, and this is actually an interesting project because it's being funded by ComEd here in Chicago, ComEd being the utility, the electrical utility company. So this is a program that is preparing students to go into electricity, either working for ComEd or working for ComEd's contractors. And as we went and recruited the students, we found that there were several good candidates that passed the screening process, but their math skills were at the 5th grade level. Their English skills, a couple of them young people that had recently migrated from South America, Ecuador and another country in South America, to the Chicagoland area, and their English skills were also at the 5th grade level. So what we did was, even though the program required a 9th grade level in English and also in math, we allowed 2 students to come into the program and created a separate adult education component for those students. So there is the regular instruction that they're going through in the workforce development program, but 2 days of the week they work with adult education instructors to address their math and their English deficiencies. And part of what they're doing also includes online instruction. So there is a combination of adult education going on with the workforce development programming, because we believe that they're good candidates for the program. There are certifications that are required in that program, and they're going to have to pass 5 certification programs. So as part of what they're doing, we're also providing intensive wraparound services with our partner, which is Aspira, as a alternative high school operation here in Chicago. They're providing intensive wraparound services, particularly for those students, to ensure that the educational components in adult ed and workforce development are successful for the students.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing. So, oh, can you go back one slide? I'm sorry, Patricia. So against the backdrop of the research and then examples like Norman was talking about, and then also the question about how to move lower skilled adults into ICAP's program, about a year and a half ago at our local area planning council meeting, which we have here throughout Illinois. There are area planning councils that coordinate adult education and now are starting to weave in workforce. In our local area, and this isn't the whole city of Chicago, but around one American Job Center, there are 13 adult education providers. So this, kind of taking all the research into account, taking in some promising practices and some gaps in service, we, as providers, came to the table one day and realized 13 adult ed providers around one AJC. So, okay, this is just kind of our framework. In that area, like, there's a lot of players. In that area, there are 32,000 unemployed individuals. There's plenty of need, and there's 500,000 people who would benefit from services. Okay, so this big issue. And as we sat around the table, we said, how are we going to represent ourselves? I mean, there's understanding in WIOA that adult education will be a core partner, but when you have so many programs in one area, how do you do that? And then also, how do we make sure that the students at all these adult education organizations are community-based, they're, St. Augustine College, they're people re-entering, coming out of the corrections system. How do we make sure those students are also aware of the wraparound services available at the American Job Center and aiming toward something at the American Job Center? I mean, that's kind of the goal of moving through the career pathway system. Okay, so I'll turn it over to Norman again.
So the challenge that Becky has indicated is that WIOA obviously wants to put together a seamless approach to career pathways where individuals can, access services and be able to move up and develop skills within that system. So, the providers that we're talking about included not only community-based organizations, but included community colleges in this case, City Colleges of Chicago. It included us, which we're a 4-year private nonprofit higher educational institution, and other providers. And what we wanted to do was coordinate a seamless process so that individuals that will have to navigate these systems, the adult ed and the workforce development system, will do it in a way that they could successfully get all the information, be able to make choices, receive services, and then transition through the different steps in the process. So because there are these requirements, as we have already mentioned, in terms of educational levels, math and language, particularly reading, that individuals need to have in order to access some of the workforce, or the majority of the workforce development programs. The ability for us to connect individuals to adult education programming in the city of Chicago was going to be important. So we decided to, fill that gap with a particular model with a navigator that represents the whole system of providers. So there's a person, we came together, agreed, and it was not easy. I mean, it took months and months of negotiations of working out the different perspectives and obviously the interest of all the organizations, plus the requirements of WIOA, so that we would come up with a very local system at the one stop where this individual represents all the adult education providers, provides information to the potential clients, but at the same time is located at the one-stop center to provide those services. So I'm gonna let my let me see if we can go on to the next slide. So I'm going to let my colleague here provide some more information. She's the one from the American Job Center. Thank you.
Thanks, Norman. So I came into this, National Label Network is the operator of the American Job Center that we're talking about. It's a comprehensive one-stop, and we provide the WIOA services. In addition, we also have an adult ed contract. So when I came into this, an early on meeting, 1.5 years, maybe even 2 years ago, the 13 providers wanted to make sure that their voices were heard and they were able to see clients at the center. But needless to say, there are limitations to space at the center, and was that actually a logical way for us to be providing services? In addition, with WIOA implementation, all of the other mandated partners, many of which also have multiple providers, were in a similar situation. So we just simply did not have enough space available, nor would it be efficient if we had everybody at the center at all times. So at the very beginning, I'll say there were some lively conversations between all of the partners, but after we got all of that out of our systems, we were able to come up with a plan. And at this point, our last meeting, everybody is very excited about the direction that we're going. So there are 13 adult ed providers. There's overlap in the services that they provide. And like I said, the other mandated partners. So Becky jumped in at the very beginning of this process. Her organization does not receive the state funding, so she is able to step in and facilitate and supervise the navigator position. Since we agreed upon hiring a new staff person for the position, we needed to figure out how to pay for that person. So if you go to the next slide, some of that is rolled out there too. So we agreed that each of the organizations would pay 1.7% of their federal allocation. And of course, since we had been talking about this for a little while, the dollar amounts had to change since new funding was assigned to us, and new funding amounts was assigned to us. But we all agreed that that was the most fair way for each organization to be represented and to pay their fair share. So when we were talking about how would the adults become connected to all the adult ed services at the AJC, I'll say we're still trying to figure out some pieces of that. The navigator officially started this week, so he is now meeting with all of those providers, learning the lingo of the adult ed world, and then developing all of the systems that are needed. But he will be fully integrated into the AJC. He will ensure that the adult ed students are connected with the options in the area. So all those 13 providers that feed into the AJC, he'll make sure that he has a clear understanding of the benefits for each of the organizations. Another one of the members of this group developed a public persona, which outlines the strengths and the services for each of the providers. So we're pulling that together right now. The navigator is also going to be fully integrated into the AJC. And at the AJC, we have something called a continuous quality improvement, where all of the partners or leaseholders of the facility meet once a month to talk about what's working, what's not working, and each of the organizations are also able to announce any new initiatives that they have or recruiting events. So our navigator will be fully integrated into that system. And then one of the pieces that is the most important and also I feel very complicated is he's going to be responsible for tracking referrals between the different agencies and what the success is. So the tracking in both directions so that we can see if this works or if we need to tweak the system. But we're hoping that this is going to become a best practice that some of the other one-stop AJCs in the Chicago area, or possibly even nationally, would be able to adopt with their own programs. Anything else you guys want to add to that?
I think that was a very good summary of what we did.
Yeah, and Andy, can you just say a couple words about the continuous quality improvement meetings that happen at the AJC? Because I think that that's something where there are a lot of adult education, adult literacy participants on this webinar, and they might not be familiar with how that works. I know it was new to me, and I think it's one of the pieces that I'm most excited about because it will really help adult education just be part of the flow of the AJC. So if you could just say a couple words about that.
Sure. So WIOA looks really great on paper, and living together with all the other organizations sounds like just a beautiful, peaceful experience. But it's hard to live together, and things break and things don't always work. And what we found is to have that open communication, we're just much more successful. So if we have a representative from each of the organizations within the WIOA umbrella, as well as with the other leaseholders there, they get together regularly. The small issues don't fester into huge issues. Right now, the working group, the continuous quality improvement group, is planning an open house, and that's going to be in May. So it's going to be an open house for the full community, and it's to let the community become aware of all of the services that are available at our center, what's in it for them, and we're also using it to recruit more people into the center. Recruitment's become a big issue this year with the unemployment rate dropping. There's still plenty of unemployed people. There's still plenty of folks that need the adult ed services, but we need to let them know that we're available and the service available to them.
The other thing I wanted to mention is that the way we envision the process working is that as an individual comes and they need to have access to that adult education, the navigator will obviously make sure that they are matched up to the best option in the area for them. Now, the adult education provider they're being sent to may not necessarily have career pathway opportunities for that individual. In other words, if the individual wants to do, let's say, a certificate in culinary arts, that individual can be referred back to the navigator, and then that navigator can match the individual to another provider that does offer that program. So it's a back and forth type of system where what we want is to ensure that the students, that the clients actually have access to all the services that they need, and that there is a centrally located place where they can go to be able to navigate those services instead of having to go through 10 different organizations and do research in all kinds of places, because that is definitely a huge barrier for success. So in other words, the implementation of WIOA, you read WIOA and it's overwhelming, and obviously a lot of times the designers of the system do not really see how it plays out in the field. But what we're looking at is making sure that implementation is fairly seamless and painless to the individuals that need the services, instead of having to face all the bureaucracy and the system problems that we already know in adult ed and also workforce development.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Okay, if you can just advance it. So, that concludes what we've prepared. I hope that there are more questions or examples. I've included all of our contact information, and as Bob said earlier, this is something we are excited to learn with national partners in terms of how this career navigator function works, and share our lessons learned across channels like this. So if there are questions or feedback, we really love to hear that.
So we do have a few questions that have come in. One, many of the students in our ABE classes are outside of the workforce. What industries can accommodate students that are stuck in the ABE levels?
Well, I think what Norman was talking about earlier, the example was with English as a second language, but I think that finding pathways where students can simultaneously work on their basic skills and start to have some kind of sector approach alongside it is a very promising practice. And I think it's something that we're hoping might come out of this deeper collaboration among our providers. Some of our providers are very community focused. They've been doing adult education for a long time, but it's been more of a community approach. And so we wouldn't want to give that away, because that's great for the community. But how can we weave in examples like electrical training or manufacturing with the instruction at those lower levels? Are there things you wanted to mention too?
We're going to start a training program soon for an organization that provides home health services. And in the home health field, particularly in Illinois, they match a lot of individuals depending on the language of the client, of the patient. They match them with individuals that can communicate and relate to them culturally and linguistically. So someone that may be at a lower level, in terms of their ABE, their English or their math, may be able to successfully go through some of that training and be able to get employment. Now, what it will require is, if you're delivering the instruction in English, it will require what we call English sensitive instructors, individuals that not only know their content, but that are also sensitive to the English language needs of the participants. Where there is a challenge, and we have worked in the college in addressing some of these issues, is when it comes to the actual certifications. Because if there's a third-party certification that is issued, we have successfully in the past worked with organizations to translate those certifications into other languages, but it does take some work to do that. So, I mean, it takes a holistic approach, but there are creative ways of doing it. I mean, the same thing can happen in culinary arts. I mean, we have done similar things in culinary arts, and we have been successful at doing that. So, I think that I come from a community college background myself, and we need to be very careful not to think that only community colleges can provide those programs, because yes, community colleges will do it at a certificate or associate degree level, but there are other ways of doing those programs and providing the instruction and the credentials without necessarily having to go to a community college where they will be required to have a high level of math and in the language. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And another with WIOA Title 1B is there's something called on-the-job training. So if an employer is willing to hire a candidate that may not completely match the skills in the job description or in the posting, but they feel like they want to help that client out, take a little bit of a risk, there is funding available that could pay for a good portion of the individual's wages while they're getting the additional training. And it could be 50 to 75% of that person's wages for a couple of months so that their skills are brought up to that level so that they can be successful in the job. So there are different incentives out there for the employers too.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that that's something that as adult education and workforce become tighter, that we'll see more examples of, because adult educators will start to connect their learners to programs like that. One thing that came to mind also that we have here in Chicago, and I know it's really prevalent around the country, is career awareness. And we have kind of a systemized approach to career awareness here in Chicago called Career Foundations that many adult education providers use a standardized lesson plan and curriculum that helps adult learners, and it can be used even at the 4th grade level to help those adult learners kind of explore career, their talents, their interests, what they like, just basic career exploration. But what's unique about Career Foundations is that it's then tied to local pathways. So if you are interested in home health care, what are your options here locally in Chicago? And the whole course is kind of focused on making that plan. Like the outcome of the course is your individualized plan and what kind of wraparound support services do you need to have in place to work your plan. So that's something that I think is really, a lot of us are very excited about here in Chicago. And Patricia, if it's okay, I'll send the link for that, and that can go out with the slides as well.
And I just want to add to that, we're also working with the Career Foundations program, and it's excellent, and it's very easy to use and integrate into your program. But that same website has the career pathway lesson plans, and all of this is free for anybody to be able to use. So that'll be great to get that out to the network.
Yeah.
Great, thank you for that. There are a couple of more questions in the box. One, is there only one career navigator? And as a follow-up to that, can they handle the workload, or do you think there will need to be more staff members?
We definitely have a vision for growing this initiative and having more career navigators. Like, we're just getting started with it. So there are still structures that need to be in place, but yes, our vision is definitely to grow and to have more people working on this project.
Ultimately the demand and the need will determine the type of resources that we allocate, but we are certainly open and have considered that as a possibility.
Mm-hmm. Great. Another question, is it your hope that once this has worked successfully, the One Stop and adult education staff will work together in gathering common measures?
Yes, absolutely. We with the position just starting, we're looking at what is the tracking system, and we are going to use what our local workforce partnership uses. So, we're starting to put that in place. But yeah, we want to be able to have kind of dashboards of metrics for programs and start to see individuals who are moving from adult ed to the workforce, or vice versa, being referred out, or wraparound services being brought out more into the community. So did I answer the question? Yeah. Anything to add to?
The other thing to keep in mind is that in Illinois, the adult education system is very data and metric driven. And also the state of Illinois is requiring all adult education providers, or at least the funded ones, to have integrated education and training systems that adult education students can access. And that would include obviously career ladders at all kinds of levels, all the way to college. In our case, at St. Augustine, our integrated education and system actually transitions students from our adult ed into bachelor degrees. But there are other programs that do it at lower levels and with different programming. So yes, I mean, the metrics and the tracking is fundamental, not only for the success of our initiative when it comes to the perspectives and the requirements of the state of Illinois adult education requirements, but it's important for our local success. We want to know how successful our model is and if we're achieving what we intend to achieve.
Great. The next question that came in, United Way of Connecticut has 211, an extensive database of resources throughout the state. They also have a navigator position to help homeless find housing and parents find childcare. We have tried to develop a career pathways version of this at UW unsuccessfully for a number of reasons. Is United Way at all involved with your project?
No, at this point, it's really been provider driven and provider led, and even the role of the coalition is more of platform and facilitator than kind of leading it. But now that we have the individual in place, I feel like other local, United Ways or funders or different entities will become very interested. And I just think it's been, kind of a risk on the part of the providers for their willingness to contribute financially to support this position. It took a lot of trust amongst us. As Andy said, our conversations were lively in the beginning. We had to build that collaboration and just to kind of put our flag in the, I don't know how to describe, just to stake our claim so that we can get the person in there and start figuring out what are the next, how do we expand it? How do we benchmark it? And I think ultimately what other partners would be interested in supporting it. There is an effort among homeless providers to also have a navigator position. So we have that here too. But at this point, it's really providers that are supporting the role. Anything you guys know?
I think those are all of the questions that I've seen. There is a thank you for including the Career Foundation's information. So if you want to send that link on to me, I'll include it in the email they get.
Yeah, definitely. And as Andy said, it's not just Career Foundations. When you go to the link, you can see open source curriculum and lesson plans for healthcare bridges and a couple other sectors. So yeah.
CDL, manufacturing, healthcare, there are probably 5 or 6.
Yeah. So
that's great. And I know that comes up, with family literacy programs that we work with across the country also, that, there may be particular needs in the school district that houses a program or something like that, where they're able to kind of build that in as a pathway for parents in the program that then feeds into supplying a need that the school district has. And that really making that connection straight into the curriculum is so helpful.
Yeah, right.
So I don't see any other questions coming in. Is there anything else that you guys want to share today?
No, I think we just want to thank everyone for their time and attention. It is an emerging project, so we hope to share, like I said, outcomes and developments with you at another time. And I appreciate everyone sharing, what's happening with them locally. And just thank you again for the invitation.
I wanted to say that, coming from a higher educational perspective, there's an opportunity here to really also look at this as a way of colleges, be it community colleges or four-year colleges, partnering with community-based organizations that are providing some very important services out there and doing it in a way that benefits all the partners at the table. I think that is needed throughout the country, and it's definitely a model that can be used to get those two important parts of the service system together, colleges and community-based organizations working together.
Great, thanks. Andy, any closing comment?
I think my closing comment would be, I was a little skeptical about this in the beginning. We have the workforce programs as well as adult education and a couple of the other mandatory titles. And I was, the very beginning, a little protective of our space and what would it be like to work with the other organizations. But the truth of the matter is, I think it's going to make all of the organizations much stronger. Competition is a good thing. And it's much better to be collaborative and to be able to refer out to other organizations when they're doing something that's more appropriate for a client or a student that you're working with. So I'm very excited to see how this gets implemented and kind of going back to the drawing board when things aren't working and celebrating our successes. But thank you so much for listening to us today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that too, Andy, because I think that one of the things that we probably haven't fully processed yet as a group is just how collaborative this effort has been. Like, I think it's been the most honest, open collaboration that I've ever been a part of, that we've worked through issues as they've come up and that everyone's still at the table. So I think it's a model in that respect too.
That's great. So one additional question did come in while you guys were kind of wrapping up, if you don't mind.
No, we don't mind.
Okay. Will we be able to get a listing of short-term training programs in the Chicago area?
Yeah, we could pull something like that together.
Okay.
I have a link, actually. I have a link of the approved short-term training with the WIOA Title I program, so I can give you that directly to send out.
Yeah, great. I'll send that out to you, Patricia, with my
Perfect.
follow-up. Okay.
Perfect. That'll be great. I don't see any others coming in. So just to kind of wrap up, thank you all so much for joining, Becky and Andy and Norman, and also everyone joining us remotely. As I said at the beginning, National Center for Families Learning hosted today's webinar, and I never like to end a webinar without giving you the opportunity to know that you could register today for a discounted rate for our upcoming national conference in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. So if you have been on the fence about joining us for a conference, this should definitely be your year. You can see the gorgeous location there on the screen, in addition to knowing that you would be able to network with some really great family literacy and adult education providers from around the country, in addition to attending concurrent sessions and our always great general sessions. So if you haven't registered yet, conference.familieslearning.org is where you can go to do that. And right now you'll save $100 off of the reservation fee. So I think that's all from us here at NCFL. Thank you guys so much for joining today, and have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.